welcome you to the Santa Barbara Water Commission meeting for January 19, 2023. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Young,
Present?
Vice Chair Cooney, absent. Commissioner Snyder,
Here.
Commissioner Keller, absent. Commissioner Davis.
Here.
And Council Liaison Sneddon, absent.
Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Chair. Just checking with the Commission Secretary. Is Ms. Cooney on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Cooney has requested to participate remotely as authorized by Government Code 54953 due to a personal medical emergency that prevents her from attending in person and arose after the posting of the agenda. As authorized by the Government Code, the Commission must take action to approve this request.
Okay, can we please have a roll call vote to authorize Commissioner Cooney's remote participation in this meeting?
Yes. Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
and Chair Young.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
So, just for the record, Ms. Cooney, please acknowledge the name and relationship of any individual in the room with you that are 18 or older.
Okay. Do we need to announce that that motion passed 4-0?
Didn't hurt.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that something we
You
were
can
going to be-
summarize that right now, and then we can,
Is that something we were going to be doing?
No, I think you just did that.
I did it,
Yeah.
but I mean, didn't we discuss doing that going
Yeah,
forward?
could have made a formal motion and gone from there, but I think it was by consensus that we did a roll call vote,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
did Commissioner Cooney?
Oh, I'm alone in this room. Sorry, I am messing around with the mute controls. Apologies.
Okay.
All right, thank you very
All
much.
right. Good. Okay. Why don't we resume our agenda and we'll go to public comment. If there's anyone in the audience or online that wishes to address the commission on any matter that's not on the agenda, now's the time to do so. Do we have anybody, Madam Clerk, online?
I don't see anybody online.
Good. All right, thank you. All right, let's go to consent items. Mr. Hagmark.
Yes,
So you can just call for the consent calendar item. See,
Okay.
I would make a motion to approve consent calendar.
Okay. Do we need a second for that?
Seconded.
We have one? All right. Roll call vote?
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooney,
Yes.
and Chair Young.
Yes. Okay, good. Let's move on to agenda item 6, administrative items. Item A, sub A, sustainability and resilience incentives and partnerships. Mr. Hagmark?
Yes, Chair Young, Commissioners, this was an item that specifically the Commission had asked for during our workshop in August. Staff has been working on collaborating with other parts of the city at this point, and we're excited today to kind of walk you through what we've been working on, and also to introduce a new department to the city, formally introduce that new department, and kind of how Water Resources is going to be working with them in the future, and then talk about some of those opportunities in the future that we hope to bring back to you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Wood. Oh, I get to introduce, that's right, the first few slides. So one of the things that I think Water Resources and this commission prides themselves on is we are leaders in sustainability. We have, we think it's part of the fabric of who we are in Water Resources. And with that, we've even acknowledged that as part of our One Water guiding principles. And that is to balance the environmental, economic, and societal goals by implementing fiscal, responsible, and equitable projects and programs that provide multiple benefits, not just singular, and increase climate resiliency by planning for climate change and mitigation. So this is something that I think runs through the culture, and hopefully you've experienced that when you've gotten tours of our facilities and talked to our numerous staff in Water Resources. It's really something that drives our thinking and how we approach problem solving. And this in particular is no different. With that, is this my slide too? No. Oh, good.
Yeah, we've got a bit of a musical chairs here today. So with us for the presentation is Alelia Parento, the Director of the Sustainability and Resilience Department, and Melissa Hetrick, who's the Acting Climate and Energy Manager. So we'll all be switching around when we are talking about our different programs and partnerships.
Thanks, Ms. Wood. And so, yes, Alelia Parento, the Director of Sustainability and Resilience, and I'm just here to kind of tell you about this new department that's been formed. We were actually formed 2 years ago, but did this slow play reorganization, figuring out who we were and what we were going to be doing for the organization. We have landed on our final configuration, which includes the Environmental Services Division, which does trash, recycling, circular economy, and homeless encampment management. And then we have Energy and Climate, which you've heard from me before specifically about those programs and how we've worked together extensively over the last decade. And that's a huge opportunity with the Water and Energy Nexus. And then we also now have the Creeks Division. So the Creeks Division, does a lot around water quality. There's a huge alignment between water resources and what the Creeks Division does. And so we're really excited about the collaboration opportunities moving forward. The reason that this department was formed was really to underscore council's commitment and the community, really, right, as the community representatives' commitment to sustainability and climate change and climate adaptation. And so we really see ourselves as a supportive department to all of the other departments, making sure that we're facilitating sustainability and resilience opportunities, helping execute on projects, developing policy that helps influence decisions made both in the organization and in the community. And so we're really excited about these types of incentive opportunities as funds come down the pike. Melissa's got a lot of funding coming down the pike for climate adaptation. We have a lot of resilience funding coming through multiple sources. And then we have these are 3 enterprise funds, so come with some funding opportunities in terms of community engagement, incentives, and projects. So with that, I think it's Melissa.
Morning, Commissioners. Just to remind you, I think you know about a lot of these, but just some of our ongoing partnerships between the Energy and Climate Division and One Water. Several years ago, we worked on installing an anaerobic digester and cogeneration facility at El Estero Water Resource Center, and an associated food, oil, and gas processing program. And we just updated the contract, the power purchase agreement with Cal Power for that to continue generating. We are installing right now, in process with Tesla, a battery energy storage system at Cater Water Treatment Plant. We've done, over the years, many LED lighting upgrades at the various water resources facilities. Next slide. Similarly, at several water resource facilities, we've helped install energy-efficient pumps, which really save a lot of energy. Most recently, we've been enrolling in the water resources facilities and energy demand reduction programs. So that's where you basically get paid to be on call to reduce your energy during a grid emergency. And recently we enrolled the desalination facility into that program, so that adds revenue to the One Water Resources Department, but also helps in the resiliency of the electricity grid. In 2021, we completed the Sea Level Rise Vulnerability Assessment Adaptation Plan that looked at amongst other things, critical facilities and our wastewater and water systems. Next slide. We're currently looking at specifics on solar photovoltaic systems at Laurel Reservoir and then Cater Water Treatment Plant in the Clearwell. We have received state funding and have an RFP out right now for analysis of climate adaptation options for the lower wastewater and water systems, particularly the assets that are located under the beach in the waterfront area that are potentially subject to increased levels of flooding in the future. And then we're continuing to work on electrification of all the city's fleet, including water resources. We just approved a zero-emission fleet acquisition policy for the city. So essentially what it says is that if you're buying a car for the city, you have to buy a zero-emission vehicle if it's feasible and cost-effective when you look at the total cost of ownership. And then associated with that, we are planning for electric vehicle charging infrastructure throughout the city. We're in process now of developing a municipal electrification plan to identify where we're going to be putting chargers and what type. And we just approved a contract with CSG, which is an electric vehicle charging provider, to install charging infrastructure in several locations throughout the city. Next slide. Oh, okay, good.
Thank you, Ms. Hetrick. All right, Chair Young and members of the commission, my name is Madeline Wood. I'm the water conservation analyst, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our energy and climate stacked incentives and our partnerships with the Creeks Division. And we also have George Johnson here, Creeks Supervisor, for any questions at the end as well. So one of the things that we banded together on in fall 2021 with the launch of Santa Barbara Clean Energy was a stacked incentive, which means it's co-funded by two different parts of the city to offer a greater benefit to our customers. And that was on the Flume device, which is something we'll also go into more detail in our next presentation in 6B. But it's a water monitoring and leak alert device that people can put on their meters to get more information about their water usage and to get alerts about high usage, breaks, etc., ongoing leaks. And so the city Water Resources Division had a rebate for that for about a year, and there was a great opportunity to have an incentive for the first 30 residential Santa Barbara Clean Energy customers to sign up for a home energy audit. As an extra incentive, Santa Barbara Clean Energy added to our rebate. So we were rebating the Flume so that customers would get it for $75, and Santa Barbara Clean Energy covered the rest of the cost, so they got a free Flume. They got the home energy audit, and then the auditor actually installed the Flume for them there. So it was a good partnership, and people were very excited about the Flumes. They really flew off the shelves that time. In terms of our Creeks partnerships, we've had a really long relationship with the Creeks Division. As you can imagine, there's a lot of overlap, especially when it comes to home landscaping and how to have more resource efficient, watershed friendly type of gardens. Not only how they're installed, but how they're maintained. So one of our most long running partnerships is our Green Gardener certification program. There's a lot of players involved in that. It's been going on for 23 years now. So that's a program that is taught by Santa Barbara City College Continuing Education, and it's funded by the Creeks Division, Water Resources Division, other water providers, the County Water Agency. We also get funding from the Air Pollution Control District, and this is a really comprehensive course. It's a 10-week course that is taught for maintenance gardeners to focus on different aspects of maintenance gardening that can reduce pollutants, such as leaf blowers, fertilizers, etc., as well as reduce water use. So we have a really strong irrigation curriculum because that's where we often find in the community that there is this disconnect between the person who has their hand on the controller and the person who pays the water bill. They're not always the same person. And so this is a great opportunity for us to provide that kind of training, which is sometimes the only classroom training some of our some of our gardeners in the community have. So it's taught in English and Spanish, and we also have city staff that teach a lot of those irrigation classes, as well as some of the local irrigation stores. This picture right here is the Ocean Friendly Garden at the Lawn Bowls Club at Spencer Adams Park. This was transformed through a whale tail grant from the Surfrider Foundation, and we did a series of community hands-on workshops where everyone got to dig in and create some berms and swales and really contour the landscape, because we directed a downspout that was either to a French drain or right onto the sidewalk, and we directed it into this garden to slow and sink and spread that water, and have it clean out the water and water the native plants along there. So that was involved a lot of workshops and classes that the community got involved in. We also both do development project review. So any code updates, we try to work together, make sure there's no conflicts. We care about what people put in their landscapes, as does the Creeks Division. We want to make sure those are permeable and low water use from the beginning, because they tend to last for a very long time. So we work on compliance pathways and make sure that we are a united front in terms of development projects that are coming through. We also have our water education program for schools, and there's often some overlap between field trips and in-class presentations, and that's something that we've always sort of co-advertised together in terms of, from the city, these are the education opportunities you have for assemblies, school presentations, different field trips to facilities, like this is a picture at El Estero Water Resource Center, or there's also Creeks field trips that are conducted as well. And then speaking of El Estero, for Creek Week, which happens every September, we like to host public tours of the El Estero Water Resource Center. Depending on the construction, there's almost always something happening at El Estero, so some years we can't do it because it's a hard hat zone, but it's a really great opportunity to highlight the role that the staff and the facility there plays in protecting public health and the environment, and talk about El Estero as an estuary. So what we are excited to talk about today, also this is an after picture of the Spencer Adams Garden that we saw at the beginning, is our new incentive that we launched just a couple weeks ago for the new year. So we did have an existing lawn replacement type of rebate that we ran for about 10 years, and we learned a lot through that program. It was over a series of grant funds, and we learned ways that we can improve upon it. And one of the things that we really wanted to focus on was permeable landscapes, and really having an extra incentive for those that direct a downspout into the garden as an additional water source, not just potable irrigation. So really the goals of this new sustainable lawn replacement incentive are to reduce the irrigation water use and to divert the stormwater into that landscape. Really use it as a resource rather than a nuisance, essentially. So it will be administered by the Water Resources Division, and eligible projects will be funded by both the Water Resources Division and the Creeks Division. And that extra incentive is basically a $250 additional bonus, if you will, per project if they disconnect a downspout, which means there's an existing downspout like at Spencer Adams Park that goes to a hardscape or goes to a French drain straight out to the street, and disconnecting it from that hard plumbed hardscape system to actually have it infiltrate into the garden and be used by the landscape there, the former lawn.
Question for you. So do we have a similar effort addressing city facilities?
That's a good question. We have not had this open to city facilities in the past. It's been something that is just for our ratepayers. I don't know if
Well,
we have interest in that, Mr. Weinberg?
And I didn't mean by incentives and things like that, but I mean in terms of redirecting
Yes.
runoff and,
Absolutely, and Mr. Johnson can kind of speak to this. If you walk around, particularly the Public Works building, we've captured pretty much all of the downspouts, and we have basically these filters that they've put in to slow down and retain some of the rainwater. Again, it's a lot of impervious, but it's basically using it like a filter to remove any sediment and slow down the water to some extent. It depends on how big the event is. But yeah, so we live what we preach, and we are implementing those projects, and Creeks has been helping bring in money to make that happen.
So you mentioned Public Works, but what about the other divisions of the city?
Well, I'll refer to Mr. Johnson on that. He can kind of elaborate what other programs he's doing around the city.
So my name's George Johnson. I'm with the Creeks Division. Anyway, we don't have any active programs to do that with any particular division or department. It's typically done when facilities are redeveloped for any reason. That's what happened with here at the Public Works. They did some improvements, and as part of those improvements, we had them do water treatment features as part of that. So the thing you were talking about was directed that Joshua was talking about is directing downspouts to these concrete boxes that are infiltration basins, and then water infiltrates into that and then slowly goes into the landscape. So it's typically things like that. There is no active program to take downspouts from all the facilities in the city and redirect them to hardscape. It's not something really that we've pursued, and it's not a bad idea, but it involves a lot of departments within the city. And so it would be, there would be some logistics to it that we would have to work out in order to get it done.
But is it kind of on the agenda such that if a structure is going to be touched,
Yes.
that it would
Right,
automatically?
that's kind of how it's working now.
Okay.
When we're doing some improvements to a structure, then that comes up, and then we look at ways to do treatment. But there's nothing proactive that's going around and saying, okay, look at this facility, its downspout could be redirected, let's do that. So,
It's more cost effective to attach it, like we do with our property owners, to a project that's already underway. Maybe you can speak. I would just assume that there's something going on at the library, given that they're doing some
yeah, the
improvement.
library. So any development project in the city is actually required to do some kind of treatment if they meet a certain threshold. And so at the library, that's a pretty big improvement project. So they do have water treatment features as part of that also.
Thank you.
So here's some of the nitty gritty. One thing that we learned from our last rebate was to do $1 per square foot instead of what used to be a 50% materials cost rebate, because it involved going through a lot of receipts. So we're trying to minimize the staff time. So this is going to be a $2 per square foot incentive, and that is to take an existing lawn, convert it into waterwise plants, mulch, irrigation, either efficiency retrofit, so convert the sprinklers to drip, or eliminate entirely. Some people just move on to hand watering at that point. And then to disconnect those downspouts that are currently directing rainwater either into a French drain that goes to the street or to some sort of impervious paved surface. So for single-family residential and the smaller multifamily residential 1 to 4 dwelling units, it's $1,000 maximum rebate. And for commercial, larger multifamily, such as HOAs, it's $2,000 per meter that serves the irrigation. In some of our larger sites, there's multiple meters that serve irrigation, so it's a maximum of $4,000 per property. Here's an example of a gutter downspout redirect. This is at the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors office on Chapala Street. It's a great rainwater demonstration garden. If you're ever in the area, I encourage you to take a look at it. We've got a good interpretive sign there that talks about what's happening below the surface that you can't really see either. In terms of eligibility, the lawn must be either living or golden, as we like to say. They're pretty much all green at this point with the rainfall, though. And we need to see a recent water use history of irrigation. Typically, that's the irrigation bell curve, where it goes up in the summer and it's down in the winter. Bare earth or weeds are not eligible. We need to have some sort of history of a lawn in place there to ensure we have some water savings. Projects that are part of or require a building permit are not eligible because, as Mr. Johnson said, will already be required in some cases to redirect, and in our case, they would also generally be required to put in waterways plants and irrigation from the beginning. And then really the focus is on living permeable landscapes, so things like artificial turf, patios, decks, decomposed granite, or other what we consider a hardscape, something that's not permeable, is not allowed to be installed in the former lawn area. So we also decided to pivot to online for some of these processes to reduce the amount of staff time. So we're asking folks to fill out an eligibility request form online that has photos of the lawn area, and then we'll set up an application appointment, which is a site visit with one of our staff members to discuss the program, answer their questions, talk about the resources that we have to help them, of course, to measure the square footage of the lawn, to fill out the application, and then the applicant has 120 days to complete the project and request the rebate. And that was the same timeline that we had in the last rebate, and that was pretty doable. We occasionally had people that asked for an extension, and as long as we had the funding, it's sort of first come, first serve. But most folks were able to do it in that time frame. And then to get the reimbursement request, that's also an online submittal with photos that include photos of the downspout that's redirected. But wait, there's more. So that is our stacked incentive, but we know not everyone can redirect a downspout, or it's already going to the landscape, which is great. So in terms of the sustainable lawn replacement rebate, we also have, that was the Watershed Works, as we're calling it, which is $2 a square foot, up to $750. But we also have what we're calling the Beautiful Basics, which is you don't have a downspout to redirect, but you still have lawn that you want to replace and put in waterways, plants, and irrigation. So that's just sort of the lower amount that doesn't have the additional incentive from the Creeks Division. And there may be a lot of people that are interested in replacing their lawn, but they don't have the ability to redirect a downspout. We also have our irrigation efficiency rebates. So maybe you don't have a lawn, or you have a lawn in the front, but you have shrubs in the back that are on a sprinkler system, and you're looking to convert that to drip irrigation. So we have irrigation rebates for drip irrigation conversion, taking a sprinkler system, putting it on drip, for what are called low precipitation sprinkler nozzles. So they reduce the amount of misting and overspray because they have a lower precipitation, and they sort of put it out in streams rather than a mist of a sprinkler. We also rebate on smart irrigation controllers that will adjust based on the weather, and laundry to landscape gray water materials. We have our Flume rebate, which is that handy device that I was talking about. So city customers pay $75 plus tax and shipping. It usually retails for about $200. We have a clothes washer rebate for high efficiency models. It's a $150 rebate. And then we have our mulch delivery rebate, which we'll be gearing up for Mulch Madness, which is our big March push for people to put in mulch. We recommend, once or twice a year based on your site. And so we reimburse for $45 up to 2 dump truck deliveries a year of the county's mulch. And then we also have our commercial, institutional, and industrial survey and incentive program. This includes a full site water use survey with water resources staff, and then tailored incentives up to $15,000 for eligible projects that have a return on investment. And I'll turn it over to Alelia, Ms. Prento, for our future opportunities.
George is much taller than I am. Future opportunities. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're really excited about this new department and all of the intercollaboration and alignments that exist and what that means for collaborating interdepartmentally on these types of programs. Currently, we do meet with the Water Resources Division, or I shouldn't say we, because the Energy and Climate Division meets with the Water Resources Division quarterly, and we could potentially expand that out to the whole department in the future. But really, those meetings are to discuss ongoing projects, opportunities, maybe grant opportunities, wild hares that Mr. Hagmark might have that he wants us to chase down related to energy, but are always fruitful. And so those have been really, really helpful. Our goal in the department is to embed ourselves into the other departments and really work as one functional team. But there are a couple of areas that we see some immediate potential incentive programs coming out of, and one is around low-income customers. The energy bills, electricity bills, which the city now controls through its Santa Barbara Clean Energy Program, have a income-qualified low-income designation called the CARE program. And what that allows us to do is to more easily identify customers that would be eligible potentially for other incentives around the city, not electricity limited, but maybe water resources, maybe trash and recycling, maybe other city services that could be subsidized because of this income qualification. So we're excited about looking for some energy and water opportunities there that are coming down the pike. School education programs. Currently, both departments have their own school education programs. And so we see a really potent opportunity to maybe combine forces in some cases and provide a more holistic approach to sustainability, resilience, and how the natural resources work together. Additionally, we want to combine forces on audit services. We currently both have audit services, and so creating a more holistic program that has one touch point as opposed to multiple is something that we're working on within our department, because actually all three divisions have that service. And so combining some of those, but throughout the organization, right? The business does not particularly care whether you're a representative from one department or the other. They just want the service and the help. So looking at that. Solid waste reduction strategies, I mean, that is the pretty much principal goal of environmental services, is to minimize waste and create reuse opportunities. And so there's a lot of nexus there that we are looking to harness. And then hot water efficiency incentives. So this is more of a natural gas centered incentive. Natural gas, hot water is a big user of natural gas in our buildings. And so we are actually currently, through Santa Barbara Clean Energy, exploring a program that would help fund for small commercial heat pump water heaters. So you would be converting from a natural gas system to an electric system, leveraging Santa Barbara Clean Energy's carbon-free electricity, and you could essentially do it for free if you're a business. So we're hoping to launch that soon. But that's one example of a hot water efficiency incentive. Also, the gas company working with the existing utilities on their incentives and helping customers access those. They have a lot of incentives related to high efficiency systems. And then parkway permeability, this is certainly related to the Creeks Division. They already have a lot of best management practices for stormwater capture. We have co-implemented some projects in the past, and the Creeks Division has implemented a significant number more of permeable surface projects, and looking for other opportunities down the line to do that and to reuse that stormwater, right? Because that's not only a water resource efficiency, but it's an energy efficiency, because there's a tremendous amount of embedded energy in water treatment. I think that's my list.
And we're available for any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Mr.
Chair.
Davis?
First, I want to congratulate the city in putting together this department. They're looking forward to the collaboration, internal collaboration, but also the outreach you're talking about to community, which normally doesn't get involved in these types of issues. So, and you've assembled a great team. So I've worked with many of you, so we've got a great start here. I do have a question, kind of relates to the Flume program. Previously, I don't understand the difference between the Flume device and the previous smart meter that we did a beta test on, and where we were going with installation of that citywide.
So, Chair Davis, that's a great question. We actually have an FAQ on our website about it.
Okay.
So,
I didn't check.
yeah, don't worry. I'll answer it for you. So, AMI, Automated Metering Infrastructure, that is a city network. So that's city providing the infrastructure, essentially. And the Flume, I would consider sort of a personal AMI device. So they can go in tandem, and they also fit in the meter box together, luckily. So the city's AMI program is something that we are in the deployment phase of. So we've been doing some of our alpha testing. We're working on the integrations. There's a limited number of them out there right now. that we had our pilot group, and now we're sort of moving into having folks do beta testing and getting access to that data. So that's sort of the longer term program, is to roll that out citywide so that our customers have access to their hourly water use data, leak alerts, and being able to sort of monitor where they're using water. Since 2021, we've been rebating on the Flume device, which is a physical device that is attached to the meter. It's then connected to your smartphone. And you can see minute by minute water usage. And you also have those leak alerts that can come through as well. So it's sort of a granular AMI for personal property rather than the city provided infrastructure.
Good, thank you, good answer, thank you.
Any other? Yes. Cora.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It's really exciting to hear about all of the great initiatives already underway and planned, particularly the kind of the Nexus programs that are bringing together, water and energy and waste. It's really exciting, and clearly you guys have put in, a lot of thought and effort to this, and really leading edge in terms of these programs. So thank you, and awesome work. And I just wanted to say, particularly on thinking about the kind of coordinated audits combined with the stacked or streamlined incentives, just seems like such a win from the perspective of the Sustainability and Resilience Department, and also just making things easier for customers of kind of, as you said, like they don't think of it, they just see the city coming in, they don't really care who it is or what department they're representing. So I think that in particular is awesome. And then I did just have one question about the sustainable landscapes and kind of like the demonstration programs. And I was wondering if you've done any sort of measurement on like the water capture or runoff reduction or anything on some of those demonstration sites.
Commissioner Snyder, that's a good question. We haven't. I feel like I heard that Cameron Benson had done a couple looks at some of the people that he knew that went through our rebate program, because he kept telling us, wow, that 4-inch spacing that you require between flagstones is perfect. Everything's just going right through it. But we have leaned on others that have done that. The San Diego County Water Authority has done a stacked incentive similar to this for several years, and they've partnered with their water quality component. I'm not sure what they're called and how they're structured, but we've sort of seen what others have done and learned from it, and they've had studies based on like dry weather flow reductions, in terms of like the irrigation runoff is less, the stormwater runoff is less. So they've done those studies that we've been able to take a look at, but we haven't studied it ourselves.
Okay. I've got a question, and that is, do we have any incentives for heat pumps, induction stoves, things of that nature?
Commissioner Young, great question. There are a number of state and federal incentives related to heat pumps. So the investment or the Inflation Reduction Act created some pathways for that for air source heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. Thank you. And so we do not currently here at the city. We're working on this program I just mentioned for small commercial. And then that would be one of our goals. Once we have Santa Barbara Clean Energy's first full year completed in March, we'll have a better sense of the fiscal position and how much money can be dedicated to consumer programs. And so we're sort of dividing the pot between building energy use and transportation. So helping folks electrify their homes, which would be heat pump water heaters and air source heat pumps, or electrify their rides, right? And so we'll be looking at ways to just tip the needle, make it economic enough to buy the heat pump so that people make that choice. But another big component that we're working with regionally with a group is contractor education. Right now, the contractor goes into the home and they're not comfortable with the technology, so they're not offering it as a solution. And that's probably our biggest hurdle, more than the financial side, is just having that knowledge locally so that people can offer it.
I think that's a great point, because I had that actual experience when I was doing a remodel And I asked the contractor, can't we do something other than gas? And they go, oh, gas is too efficient, you just put it right in. And I got the sense that that individual just didn't really understand or appreciate the alternatives out there.
And
this
I
was just
think that is very true. I think there's also not an understanding. Gas has always been very, very cheap in California. That has changed this month. Meant to tell you, your gas bills will be double this month, literally double. So that won't last, that won't persist, but the commodity markets with the geopolitical situation in the Ukraine and then a major pipeline exploding here has really changed the landscape for gas pricing, which is very unfortunate for the consumer, but actually very fortunate timing for our electrification efforts because it helps level the playing field a little bit. But there have been many studies done that though the electric technology is much more expensive up front over the life cycle, they're so much more efficient that you're saving money. Now, that's a hard sell to someone who's already not very comfortable with the technology, and then, over the life of the appliance, so in 15 years, I'll make my money back, but today I have to spend a whole lot more. So that's where those incentives come in, and then that education for the contractor to really say, natural gas in your home is poison. Like, this is a health decision as well as an energy decision. And so we won't put it that way, but we'll work on the language. But that's a key component for us.
And where can members of the public go if they have questions about how to do these conversions?
Yeah, so there is a Tri-County Regional Energy Network, which the city is a part of. And it's run by the 3 counties, so Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo, that has a really robust program for electrification, and they actually manage incentives for what's called hard-to-reach consumers. And hard-to-reach consumers used to mean rural, but now it actually means non-English speaking, maybe less educated and savvy in the energy space, which is most of us. And so they have programs specifically tailored to reach those customers. And so they have websites that have a lot of information. They hold courses for contractors. They have rebates for these, some of these technologies, and they're just trying to grow their programs. So they're fairly new.
And members of the public can call
Absolutely.
and get information back.
Yep.
Right. All right. Well, it makes me feel good just to see everything that has been coordinated and put together. It's really quite broad, and it's very encouraging. I wish all municipalities, were up to speed with things the way our city is.
Thank you.
Good work, all of you.
Thank you.
Cora.
On this kind of the theme of customer outreach, I was wondering, and probably Ms. Wood, this is a question for you, on the strategies around outreach regarding these rebate programs and letting customers know that they're now available.
So Commissioner Snyder, we have had folks that are, because we sunsetted our previous program in 2020, so we've had some folks who have been reaching out, especially HOAs, because they need to budget well in advance for, lawn replacement projects. So we've been reaching out to the ones that have been pretty persistent in asking when these incentives are coming back. And then we have planned outreach throughout January and February through our city programs like the City News and Brief. Some of that got a little delayed with the weather impacts. We sort of had to curtail some of our launch promotion because we've had sandbag information and all kinds of other really time-dependent information to put out there. So it'll go in the City News and Brief. It'll go in the bill inserts. We'll have our quarterly e-newsletter. We'll push it out on social media. And then we're also planning to do an advertising campaign. We usually start advertising in the spring when people start turning on their irrigation systems. And so that's when we will be highlighting the rebate program or the multiple rebate programs in terms of not just lawn replacement, but also irrigation efficiency improvements.
Any other commissioner
Yeah,
questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, there was a comment made relative to looking at the technical studies for adaptation of the infrastructure in the beach area. I thought that RFP was going out or whatever. Is there any idea in terms of schedule where that is and what that projected to be?
Yeah, we have Sorry about that. We have the RFP out right now. We're probably actually going to be extending it because many of the consultants are working on the emergency situation throughout California. But once we get a contractor underway, we will spend the next about year developing a climate vulnerability and adaptation options report that will look very specifically at the phase one work, so work that needs to happen in the near term or immediately to the affected, potentially affected portions of the very lower system. So as part of that, we'll be looking at options for the sewer trunk main under the beach and how either moving that or floodproofing that might affect service point improvements or other portions of the hydraulics of the system that need to change. And so we'll be doing cost estimates in feasibility study of that. And then the study will also be looking at triggers for mid and long-term adaptation options and broader options for the whole system in that time frame. That's also meeting a requirement of our NPDES permit that was put on our last permit cycle. So that report will be released. I think we're actually coming here in next meeting.
Yeah,
Or-
Commissioner Davis, we have
Yeah.
a centric plan to come back in the spring. We were planning when we had the consultant under contract
Yeah.
and kind of go through the scope and what we're intending to do, and at that point have a better schedule because we'll have a contractor or a consultant on board.
Yeah, I can go through the whole project, but we're actually applying for more funding now from the Coastal Conservancy to actually take the project beyond feasibility stage and start looking at potential, like actually getting concept plans for the first phase and things like
Great,
that.
good, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Chair, I just wanted to recognize this team. I mean, Madeline Wood, Alelia, Melissa, and George have really been working behind the scenes for a long time. And it was really actually fun putting this presentation together and just highlighting like all the things that we've been doing over the years. But it really makes me proud to work for this organization. I love to see the kind of collaboration that's going on. They seem to work across barriers of departments and really are getting things done for the best of this community, and it's great to have this opportunity to talk about all of it, kind of daylight all this for the public. So kudos to this group. Keep up the great work.
And it shows. It shows. Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 6B, Flume Residential End Use of Water Study. So we're going to hear a little bit more about a component of what we were just talking about.
That's correct. Chair Young, members of the commission, Madeline Wood, water conservation analyst. So today we'll be talking about the newly completed residential end use of water study, which is something that's really exciting. It's really something that water nerds love, and so hopefully you'll be just as excited as we are about it. So I'll do a little overview in terms of what is Flume, what is our rebate, and then we'll have Joe Fazio and Peter Mayer, who are part of the Flume Data Labs team, to talk about the study results. So let's see if we could switch back to the perfect PowerPoint. So this is a great visual of what is the Flume. It's got a few components. So it's a physical device that is strapped onto the city's water meter. Those are just rubber straps. It's easily installed in under 10 minutes. It comes with an app that shows you how to install it. And then it connects to your property's Wi-Fi with something called a bridge that's just plugged into any outlet in your garage or house, for example. And what it will give you is minute-by-minute information about your water usage. And it will also disaggregate that usage into indoor and outdoor, which you can see here in the two shades, the dark blue and the light blue. And it will also tell you a fixture breakdown, how much your dishwasher uses, your clothes washer, etc. And then one of the really handy things is that it does alert you about continuous usage, whether that's a slow like toilet leak or a burst event, a high usage leak, like you have a mainline break or something busts in your irrigation system, and there's sort of a high usage. It's a lot of fun. You can look at, your shower flow rate. For example, I can tell that from this morning, I prefer a much softer shower than my husband because I use about 1.3 gallons per minute with my shower head, and he's about 1.45. So he just really cranks it up compared to me. So there's a lot that you can dig into, or you can just use it to sort of passively tell you when you have a problem going on.
There should be a disclaimer about the friction it can cause in the household. I too have it, and it's been interesting.
But who took a longer shower? That's really the question.
That's true. I did not count all the minutes. I'll have to see. We'll make it a competition. So the city's offered a rebate on these Flume devices since February 2021. We've rebated over 1,200 of them so far. And we've also done a couple surveys with our customers that have received them, which has been really interesting. There's a number of questions that we've asked them, but some of them include, does this lead you to better understand where you use your water? Have you found a leak? Where did you find that leak? Has this led to changes in your behavior? Is that outdoor, water use behavior, indoor, both, etc.? Has this impacted how you feel about your water utility? Luckily, people are giving us a thumbs up with the Flumes. Here's just some anecdotes here that got a little squished on the side, but one person said it helped me figure out that I had my sprinkler programmed wrong. Surprise, surprise, it's maybe coming on every day and they didn't realize that. Or it stopped my daughter from taking 30 to 45-minute showers, which is something that we also hear. And then the city customers that receive the Flume sign an agreement allowing the sharing of their water use data, which leads into our Flume residential end use of water study. So now I'd like to turn it over to Joe Fazio, who's the general manager of Flume Data Labs, and Peter Mayer, who's the principal of Water DM, to talk us through the study that they've done with all of this great information.
Great, thanks Madeline, and Chair Young and members of the commission, thank you for inviting us to present today. We're pretty excited about presenting this study to you, so I think we saved some time at the end to ask questions. There's always lots of questions, so we'll make sure we save some time for that. Madeline, if you can put up the presentation, that would be great. And I can't see it on my end. Is it possible to, there we go, perfect. Thank you so much. Well, great. As Madeline said, Santa Barbara has actually been offering rebates on Flume devices now for almost 2 years now, actually maybe even a little over 2 years. And because of that now, we have about a little over 1,000 Flumes that are installed in Santa Barbara. And those little black dots, hopefully you can see that okay on your monitor there. You can see there's a pretty good geographic dispersion of Flumes pretty much all over the water district now. So again, the cool thing about this is that every single one of those devices now we're getting data from. And the data that we're going to be presenting in this study is coming from all of those devices. It comes anonymously, so we're not telling you that somebody on Main Street is, at 1234 Main Street is watering their lawn too much. All of this data is anonymized and aggregated for the purposes of this study. So if we go to the next slide, this kind of just shows the growth of Flume over the last 2 years, starting in January of 2021. And you can see here, we started with about 50 Flumes in January of 2021. And that's, I think we started the rebate program in February of 21. And since then, you can see there's been pretty good growth of Flumes over the last couple of years. And again, this as more Flumes get installed, we just keep including them in the study, and the data just gets richer and richer, which is great. And if we can go to the next slide. We often get asked are the flume users representative of kind of the broader district? So we wanted to present some demographics of what exactly a flume user looks like. So on average, a flume user's house is about 62 years old. We'll talk about that in a second. The average number of residents is 3. Average lot size is actually fairly big. We think that's skewed with a couple of customers that have very large lots. However, the median lot size is actually a little truer to what we normally see, about 1/4 of an acre. And also the average home size is about 2,300 square feet. And then, as you know, houses are expensive in Santa Barbara. So, you know, the average home value is about $2 million, and the median's pretty close to that as well. One of the things that we get asked a lot is there's a fallacy that we found, and when we really started digging into all of the flume data, not just the flume data in Santa Barbara, and that the fallacy is that older homes use more water inside than newer homes, with the supposition that newer homes have more efficient fixtures, have been built and have had more stringent plumbing codes to adhere to. But what we're finding is that old homes and new homes are using just about the same amount of water indoors. And Peter, you may want to comment on that too. You've done a lot of research on this.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't describe it as a fallacy. I mean, it used to be absolutely true that older homes had higher water use. But what we're now tracking with flume data is really the transformation where older homes are just as likely to be as water efficient as newer homes. Only instances we're finding is the very newest homes. Some of those can be more efficient. But if you look just across, you know, the age of homes, it's not the factor anymore because of retrofits and other improvements. That's actually a very good finding, but it does make it a little harder to then, you know, try to go after indoor savings. You really need to try to find the outlying high uses.
Thanks, Peter. Can we go to the next slide, please? So back to the question of, are flume users actually representative of everybody else in the district? And Peter and I took a look at the billing data from all of the Santa Barbara customers, and we looked at the data from just flume users. And what we found is that flume users actually use more water just based on their billing data than non-flume users, which kind of makes sense, right? The people that are going to gravitate to getting a flume device are the ones that are using a lot of water, the ones that have big landscapes, the ones that have high water bills, may have experienced a leak before. Those are the typical people that are purchasing the flumes through the rebate program. But Peter, as we see here, the purple line being the water use of the flume users, and then the blue line being the water use of everybody else, essentially. It's funny, the curve shapes are similar, it's just really the magnitudes are different.
That's the critical thing, yes. So the flume users are certainly using more water, particularly in the summer months, the outdoor. But the shape of the curves are very similar. So, you know, they're all responding very much to the same thing. Even some of the blips that you're seeing in 2022, an increase in both lines. The other thing is just you know, I threw on trend lines just to show, you know, the general trend line on the flume users is to reduce their use, and the general trend line across the broader population is a slight increase. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, because we do have a finding that the impact of owning a flume device is actually to reduce your water use.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll dig into that at the end of the presentation. It's also interesting too that those curves almost intersect in the winter, meaning that really the difference indoor is probably very similar between these two groups, but it's really the outdoor water that is really moving the needle.
Yeah.
All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. Well, great. First thing we looked at was indoor water use. And I'm going to set this chart up, and then I'll turn it over to Peter to do a little bit of analysis. On the y-axis is indoor gallons per person per day. So on the y-axis, we're looking at the average indoor gallons per person per day. Again, this is just of the flume users. And then on the x-axis, we basically have time. And we're looking at essentially 8 quarters here, going all the way back to January of 2021. And I guess the big takeaway here, Peter, is that people in Santa Barbara are using indoor water very efficiently.
Well, it's a little hard without any context, but the history of indoor water use, which is, I've kind of my career studying this stuff. So in 1999, the average home in the United States used about 70 gallons per person per day. So here you have Santa Barbara, a large sample in Santa Barbara, averaging about half that. It's so substantial indoor water use efficiency, and 35, 36, 37 GPCD is the level of indoor use that has been measured at WaterSense rated homes that were intentionally designed with low, to have high efficiency toilets and fixtures. So overall, yeah, this is definitely a statement regarding indoor efficiency.
I think let's go to the next slide. We threw this graph in mainly because it's kind of interesting and cool. What we did is we looked at every hour of every day, and we took a look at when people are using indoor water use the most. And so just to set this up is the first kind of peak there is Sunday, the next one's Monday, the next one's Tuesday, et cetera. And what we're looking at is kind of average water use per hour for each of those days. And it's kind of hard to read on this, and I apologize, but the peaks basically are occurring, the peaks are occurring at 8 a.m. On the weekends, the peaks are occurring at about 9 a.m. And Peter, we were looking at this earlier, and I think the biggest difference here is that if you look at the troughs, which are perhaps even more interesting, the troughs on the weekends aren't quite as deep as they are on weekdays. And I'm assuming that's because people are staying home on the weekends and they're not on the weekdays.
Yeah, laundry day. There's more indoor use, more use at home. This, I don't think there's a big surprise here, since we all, this is sort of like describing our own patterns. The morning peak and then the evening. But there's subtle variations of this chart that we will see from place to place. And the notable thing in Santa Barbara, I think, is the higher use during the day on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah. Can we go to the next slide, please? So there's a couple interesting things about this next chart. What we're looking at here now is exclusively outdoor water use. And again, we're looking at those same 8 quarters. We're looking at 2 years of data here. And the peaks in this chart are basically average outdoor water use in the summer. And then the troughs, if you will, are looking more at the winter months. So I think a couple of takeaways from this slide is that first of all, Santa Barbara used less outdoor water this year, or I should say in 2022, than they did in 2021. And we're seeing that trend pretty much everywhere in Southern California. And Peter, we're chalking this up to messaging, because really when we looked at the weather, and we'll look at that in a second, weather wasn't much different 2022 versus 2021. But we saw pretty much big decreases in outdoor water use across the board in Southern California.
Right. And we're going to be seeing this. We're going to look at a variety of outdoor use charts. I think we should go to the next slide so this actually shows outdoor water use by day. And the interesting thing about this one is that it's Mondays and Fridays are the peak day for outdoor use, with some days on Wednesday. And this is another one that we'll see variations based on the utility, and some utilities often are intentionally encouraging people to water on certain days or to not water on certain days.
Yeah, and let's go to the next chart, because that's the one.
This is the one I was thinking was coming up next.
Yeah. So I'll set this up, Peter, and I'll turn it back to you. What we're looking at here at the top is in blue, we're actually looking at the actual water use, the outdoor water use of flume users. So that's the blue curve. And again, we're looking at 2021 and 2022. And in orange is evapotranspiration, which is basically a measure of temperature, humidity, rainfall. It's all kind of rolled into one kind of metric. And it's a really good indicator of, whether it's hot and dry one day or cold and wet one day. So the lower that orange peak goes, the colder and wetter it might be. And then the higher that orange peak goes, the hotter and drier it might be. So you can see that there's a really interesting correlation between the weather in orange and the actual water use in blue. And then also on this chart is precipitation, and that's in red below. So in red below, it's showing how much it rained on any given week. And you can also see there are very, very close correlations between when it rains and how it affects both evapotranspiration, as well as outdoor use. And Peter, I know you wanted to get back to the point we started to make before.
Well, I mean, the outdoor use curve is so heavily influenced by the precipitation and the climate. So evapotranspiration is really a measurement of the water requirement of plants, and you can set it up to be the water requirement of any plant. Typically, it's some version of turf grass, and it's also how the state is calculating the objectives for water use. But I think the most notable drop is in 22, where you see that precipitation that occurred in the spring and the very sharp drop in evapotranspiration and the absolutely corresponding drop in water use, right there. Then it's kind of interesting, though. In 2022, the water use line stays pretty much below the orange line, the evapotranspiration line, versus 21, where it was above. And our speculation is that this is actually people responding to drought messaging, even though it wasn't particular to Santa Barbara, but across Southern California, there was plenty of drought messaging. And it certainly looks like people used less water compared with what was required.
Yeah, and although the drought restrictions weren't mandatory in Santa Barbara, certainly they were hearing about it, and there was certainly messaging done from Santa Barbara about the drought, even though that there weren't mandatory restrictions.
There's a shared media shed, and then that's an issue with drought messaging when you have differential responses, between close neighbors.
Definitely. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. This is kind of a cool slide. We basically put the total water use in yellow, the outdoor water use in the kind of greeny blue color, and then in the kind of aqua blue at the bottom is indoor use. And again, we're looking at the same 8 quarters, the last 2 years, and just kind of overlaid them all on top of each other. And I love this curve because it basically shows that indoor water use is basically fairly constant. It doesn't change a lot. I mean, we saw some changes during COVID and people staying home, but now that we're beyond that, the indoor water use is basically constant. Everything's driven by outdoor water use.
Yeah, the magnitude of the outdoor water use, even in the wintertime, is impressive. And this is very typical of Western United States, where you see, irrigation and other outdoor uses. It's the dominant use.
Great. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this chart is actually pretty similar to the weather chart we looked at before. However, there's a little nuance to this. So I asked Madeline before, and if you guys had talked about the new efficiency framework that the state is starting to implement. And basically, it sounds like you guys have all been well briefed on this. Basically, the state is assigning water budgets to households, and it's based on that evapotranspiration that we looked at before. It's also based on landscape area measurement and a few other factors. So what we did is, in orange, what we did is we looked at, for the set of flume houses, what was the state's water budget for all of those houses? And that's what we're looking at in orange here. And then in yellow, we mapped out what was the actual water usage from that set of houses, and then compared the two. And what we found here is that the Santa Barbara houses, at least the ones that had flumes, were actually using less than what the state was mandating as these budgets. We even used the state's most stringent standards, the 2030 standards, where they're setting ETF at 0.6, and then the indoor target at 42. Even with the most stringent standards, this group of flume users actually was staying within the state's budget, and pretty handily as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One clarification: the state is calculating the objective really at the utility scale. And then what we're doing is taking that and adapting it with the flume data down to, this household level, but we're looking at it across multiple households. So, I theoretically, if you were then to, assume that this were escalated to the community scale, you would think that the water use of the single family customers would be well below the objective for 2030.
Correct. Next slide.
It's a little bit of an apples and oranges thing with the way the state is doing it. So,
Yeah.
But it's a pretty good. I think it's a good measure that the single family customers in Santa Barbara are really already there at the 2030 objective.
Yeah, that's a good point, Peter. Thank you. Next, we decided to take a look at how Santa Barbara is doing next to its peers, if you will, some other coastal communities in California. And maybe we'll just focus on kind of the last quarter. So this basically, again, looks at the same 8 quarters that we've been looking at, but let's just focus on Q3. And what we're doing is we're comparing the indoor use, the average indoor use between these different communities and by quarter. And in red is Santa Barbara, and then varying shades of blue are the other communities. So in the latest quarter, Q3, we're seeing that Santa Barbara is pretty similar to San Luis Obispo, Santa Monica, Thousand Oaks. And then Santa Cruz is really the outlier. Santa Cruz is always an outlier. It's super efficient. It's one of the most efficient communities, and certainly in California, if not the United States. The other thing too that I'll point out is our sample size in some of these other communities is a lot smaller than California. In fact, it may be as small as 25. So these numbers are a little squishy, but at least give some sort of comparison here.
I would say all of these communities are efficient.
Yeah.
Maybe Santa Cruz, portends what might be possible for other communities to achieve. But all of these communities are this is an extremely efficient level of indoor use.
Yeah, definitely. And then if we go to the next slide, we can take a look at a peer comparison of outdoor use as well. In this case, if we go again in the last quarter, now we're looking at just outdoor use. Santa Barbara is typical. It's similar to Santa Monica and Thousand Oaks. Again, Dana Point, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Cruz are lower. I think what's interesting though in this chart is Thousand Oaks which is kind of in 2021, the biggest water user. There's been a big action in outdoor use in Thousand Oaks. In fact, Thousand Oaks actually had mandatory watering restrictions in 2022, which I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's why there is a big reduction there.
Well, it's a good hypothesis.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty close to accurate. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Now we're going to take a look go inside the house again, and we're going to look at fixture use. And we looked at all of the fixture use from all of these flume devices for Q2 and Q3 of last year. And we actually basically looked at all of the indoor use and then figured out how much of it was toilets, how much of it was showers, et cetera. And you can see here the predominance of the use inside the house are toilets and showers. And we see this pretty much in every community. They're each about a third of the use. Faucets being the next, biggest use. What's interesting is dishwashers are almost nothing, and clothes washers are, less significant, but still significant at about 10%.
And leaks, so one thing to note is leaks are much lower in this analysis than in previous end-use studies. And we're going to talk about why we think that. We think that's largely a result of flume, actually. But but the percentages are not all that different from what we've seen in other studies that have used a similar approach of essentially data loggers or micro flow metering. The thing is, it looks like, if you look at this, you'd say, oh, we got to save water in toilets and showers. But actually, when you get into it, yeah, there's some savings to be had there, but already there's a fairly efficient flow rates and volumes, even in those fictions. You got to remember that this is a pie chart that's breaking up, what's already efficient use at 37 GPCD indoors. So.
In fact, let's go to the next slide because that'll illustrate.
Oh yeah, there's the toilet slide. So what was tell us the average and the median flush volume.
Yeah, so the average toilet flush volume in Santa Barbara was 2 gallons per flush. However, the median was 1.6 gallons per flush.
So the federal standard is 1.6 gallons per flush, and then the California standard or requirement is actually lower at the WaterSense at 1.28. So what this shows us is, yes, there's still some old toilets out in Santa Barbara, but on average, the flushes are efficient, and so and then again, if these old toilets were a huge issue, we would see a higher level of average indoor use, but. It's not too surprising given the age of the housing that we're seeing too. The other thing we should point out is that it's somewhat of an imperfect measurement of toilet flushes because sometimes the toilet's refilling at the same time someone uses the faucet to wash their hands or some other water uses going on. So there's some slightly higher elevated volumes, we think, in our measurements of the average toilet flush volume.
Yeah, and we also think that the ones that you're seeing, the outliers kind of that are in the 4, 5, 6 gallons per flush that are also could be things like double flushes and things like that, because the toilet just keeps filling through that whole kind of multiple flush event.
Yeah. So it's you got to take these data a little bit with carefully in terms of setting policy. I would not rush out to to rebate a bunch of toilets, especially with my gallons per capita per day already so low.
Yeah. All right, and the next slide talks about the shower efficiency. And I think we're seeing a similar level of efficiency here. The average shower flow rate is about 1.9 gallons per minute. So actually, Madeline mentioned her shower flow rate at 1.3 gallons per minute. So she's actually got a pretty efficient shower. But again, what's the WaterSense?
So 2.5 is the energy policy ad. WaterSense is 2.0, but there's plenty of shower heads that are at 1.5, 1.75, and then, as Madeline pointed out, personal preference is probably the biggest factor as people adjust, the water pressure and the temperature really to their own desires, and so that's why you get so much variability.
Great. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So we alluded to this earlier, but we wanted to dig into this a little bit more in the next 2 slides. And we really wanted to assess how much water flume users are saving. And we looked at it in a couple of different ways. And the first way we looked at it is we took all of the flume users and we basically lined them all up. You see time 0 at the very left on the x-axis here. And we basically looked at time 0, what was the average amount of indoor water all flume users were using. And then we
Time
looked
zero
at-
is time zero is the day that they installed the flume?
Yes, sorry, Peter. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, so time zero would be when they all installed their flumes, and we lined them all up. And then we looked at, okay, at week 1, what was the average amount of indoor use they all used? At week 2, what was the amount of average water they used? And we looked out 40 weeks. And what you see here is that basically when they first installed the flume was when their water use was the highest indoors. And then over time, 2 things happened. There was this almost immediate reduction in indoor water use. And then number 2, they actually maintained that indoor water, that reduced level of water use for, in this case, we looked at 40 weeks. And this sample was actually, looking at the number, about 575 flumes. So we took the 575 that have actually been installed for 40 weeks and did this analysis. And what we found basically was that these flume users basically reduced their indoor water use by 15% and kept it there. So that was a great finding. I mean, that's a lot of water. And Peter, we're attributing this to 2 things, right?
Well, leaks, I think, is first and foremost. I mean, the device is designed to find and alert people to leaks. And that initial drop that you see certainly is probably people finding leaks that they weren't aware of. Now, we know leaks are a random occurrence and continue, so it's not surprising then you see all these other fluctuations that occur. But the fact that the usage stays down suggests that people are continuing to find and fix leaks. And then also there could be some behavioral changes too that are occurring as a result of the flume, maybe because of increased awareness.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's look at the next one, because we wanted to confirm the finding. So this graph actually uses billing data, on the left side, the bars are water use. The orange line is actually the number of flumes that were available, flume users that were available, right, in the analysis. But what we found is that in the year before flume installation, and then the orange bar is the month of flume installation. If you look at the year before and the year after, you find that same, essentially about a 15 to 16% reduction overall. It doesn't occur right away the same way that you see in the previous chart. But there's definitely appears to be a lingering overall impact to reduce water use, probably largely through leak reduction and behavior change.
Great, and I think that was our last slide. If you can go to the next slide, I think we can take some questions.
Okay, Arturo.
Yes, thank you very much for a really excellent study for us, Water Nuts. This is really, really fun stuff, and it really presents a lot of very useful information. With some surprises, actually. Some things, a lot of things we kind of understand, but some of these are surprising things. First, a few comments and then a question. So it seems to me that, the trends, we have to be a little careful because, of course, the number of users was increasing as the study was being done. So comparing the 2 years is just a little tricky always. No? So
exactly. You got to be very careful with that.
Be careful with that. I think as the program matures, then it'll be better and it'll be easier. Then the other one is your graphs on the distribution of toilet efficiency and shower efficiency reminds us that the average or the median is not necessarily always the best way to look at it. We probably need to look in some of the other graphs at the distribution. What's the kind of the distribution of users? Some people are being really efficient and others are still lagging. So what's the distribution of those and how many of those people we need to target? Then the other one is this graph that you showed, which is very interesting on the second to the last, flume users reduced indoor use by 15%. It kind of suggests that a rental program would be actually quite useful. In other words, instead of selling it to them and rebating it, a rental program where you then learn a lot about it, make your reduction, and then move on and put it back. Maybe that's a better option for the city, no? The question or the questions is, how do you distinguish between indoor use and outdoor use and then the different fixtures, given that the flume is only at one point?
So the flume device measures the flow through the meter every 5 seconds, which essentially creates then what we call a flow trace. Mm-hmm. So you can see when water is flowing through the meter and when it stops. Right. And then it's a multi-step process. The first step is you break that flow trace into discrete uses of water, where it goes essentially from zero back to zero again. And then you calculate a bunch of statistics about each of these different water uses. And then it's a signal processing approach that because the toilet flushes in the, with essentially the same flow rate. And Flume has devised a machine learning approach. So they have using a data set of known uses. They've trained it, and because we have so many users, we're continually improving this approach. And the machine learning. So that's really the short answer is this is a signal processing. And this is really how residential water use has been studied worldwide since the 1990s from either a data logger or a single point of use. It's so expensive to do any kind of other monitoring, and you end up wiring the entire house. And people also find it very intrusive. This approach where you're able, it's maybe, there's some inaccuracies compared to, if you had measured each faucet and things like that. But it's so much less obtrusive, and the samples are so much bigger that it ends up being a much preferred approach and superior.
Great, fascinating. Thank you very much.
Okay, Cora.
Thanks for the presentation. As Madeline said, water nerds love this stuff. So it's definitely was fascinating to see this presentation. I had several questions throughout the presentation, but I wanted to focus in on the indoor fixture use pie chart on slide 19. Just had some clarifying questions on that. One was about the leaks. I would love to dig a little bit more into leaks. So one, you noted that this is something that you assume is reduced due to having the Flume data. But I was also wondering if you can identify where the leaks are largely coming from, like which device or appliance.
Not specifically. It's like, we can't tell which toilet is flushing. Was that the basement toilet or the bedroom toilet, But we do know that there are many common culprits, and toilets are the number one cause of indoor leaks in particular. And there's multiple ways that, unfortunately, toilets leak. Some are more obvious. Some it's like a dribble, constant leak. Others, it's a periodic refill that occurs. So that is absolutely the number one thing. The other thing that occurs, is someone accidentally leaves a faucet on, something like that. And that's also where the Flume is really good, because it will pick that up immediately, that there's an unusually long, continuous leak like that. What's harder is the intermittent.
And I'll tell you that 2/3, we do surveys all the time of our customers. Not only do we look at the data, but we also do surveys of our customers. And the question we always ask within the first 30 days, we ask them, did the Flume alert you to a leak? And 2/3 of our customers say yes. And I forget what percentage of that found more than one leak. It's actually a fairly big number. And when we dig into that, well, what was the leak? As Peter said, number one is toilets. But number two is things like, we left a hose on, we left a faucet on, and it was, great that Flume told us. And, not something you would consider a traditional leak, but it's a waste of water regardless.
Yeah, it's like human error kind of leak.
Yeah. And then I also had a question about the 15% reduction on indoor use. I was wondering if you've seen similar results on outdoor use, or if you were able to calculate that.
So outdoor use is much more complicated. So that's why I was interested in looking at the billing data, perhaps. We're still studying the changes in outdoor use. I mean, you could see outdoor use was much lower in 2022 than it was in 2021. But there's so many other influential factors, such as the messaging, the climate, who had a Flume in as was pointed out already. So we're not prepared to tease out the outdoor use savings to the same degree. We can look at total use, and we can see, we can definitely see the trend downward. The impact on indoor use is something that we're feeling is pretty incontrovertible because we're seeing it in almost every community. I think in every community, in fact, where we've looked at this point.
Got it. Yeah, it was fascinating looking at the similar weather in the summers of 2021 and 2022, but the substantial reductions and the possibility that that's due to the drought messaging and media outreach. That's a fascinating finding. So thanks for sharing that. And then I also had one final question, which might be more for the city folks, which is just for those 1,200-ish flume devices, what % of customers is that?
Well, we have 27,000 meters in our system. And this is a nice segue for a comment I wanted to make, because I do get this question is, once the city does roll AMI out, do I still need a flume? And I think there's a certain customer that, yes, I think they complement each other. And just to give you a sense, and chime in if I get this wrong, but our AMI system is going to measure in increments of 1 cubic foot. So 7.48 gallons will be the kind of a minimum that it will read. And it's doing readings every 15 minutes. Again, every hour. Again, a lot of this goes back to battery life, because with 27,000 connections, having to go out there every year or two and replace batteries was just not something economical at the time. And it still remains uneconomical. Where I think this product is, it gets you into that really granular data. We're going to be able to do with the software we're getting some analysis on a large scale, certainly picking up certain signatures of leaks. But I do think the Flume product offers another level. I like the idea of potentially having a rental fleet of Flume. I don't know if their software is set up for that kind of concept, but yeah, I do think they complement each other. Certainly going to provide us as a utility a lot more information about what neighborhoods are using the most water, where we need to focus our messaging, a lot of that. But I think for the homeowner, particularly someone who has an interest in water usage and wanting to get better controls over it, I think the Flume offers a lot of benefits to them. So anyway, I think it's exciting. It really is exciting. I think all these tools help us to become better with our water management. And, someone living in an apartment, do they necessarily need a Flume? I don't know. I mean, it could provide some advantages. Maybe our AMI will be plenty for them, but maybe if you have a residential property with some landscaping and such, and maybe older pipes, the Flume is a better setup for you. So,
I did want to ask about that, the potential applications in multifamily or commercial properties.
Yeah, so our market that we've gone after is residential, single-family residential. Multifamily is okay as long as each unit is individually needed. So that would be newer developments. For the older developments where 1 meter is shared for 12, 16 units, it's not as great of an application. It'll work, but we can't disaggregate and figure out what's a toilet when there's 16 units on 1 meter, because we have all these overlapping events. However, we do have people using it in what I'll call light commercial, restaurants, churches, dry cleaners, things like that, where it's super useful. And we do have people using it to monitor multifamily, mainly just to be looking for leaks. What they do is they'll report a baseline at 2 a.m. every morning, and then they'll basically look to see, are we above or below that baseline at 2 a.m. every morning, just to kind of tease out leaks, and that's been useful for them. But really, everything's been designed for single family, and that's where we have the most utility, I would say.
Thank you.
So you have 1,000 deployed here in Santa Barbara. How much do you have statewide? What kind of distribution of the Flume product?
Yeah, we launched a program with LADWP in September of last year, and we've almost doubled the number of Flumes in California. I think we're up to over 25,000 now in California alone. So there's a pretty big network. In fact, we're starting to work with the state and some kind of regional planning agencies and wholesalers to really kind of understand water usage in not only at the state level now, but also regionally as well.
Any questions, Dave? No. I've got a few questions. Any idea why Santa Cruz is so much more efficient in their water use than all the other communities that you looked at?
Peter, you might have some more background on that.
That's some of the lowest indoor water use I've ever seen. I'll be honest with you. So well, we haven't looked at it that closely. It's a small sample.
Yeah,
That's
it's pretty
the first
small
thing I would
sample
say.
still.
So you know, I'd take that comparison with a grain of salt.
As you know, Santa
I-
Cruz
just
likes to
looking
be
at-
weird.
If you look at Santa Cruz's, you know, reported data to the state, their per capita use is very low. So
Okay.
I think in both.
short showers.
I think both cases of Monterey and Santa Cruz, they have limited water supplies. And I think that basically they've been inundated, or that's not the wrong word. Yeah, they've dealt with that issue for a long time. So I think in terms of the community response has been there for decades and decades.
Chair Young, I can
Yeah.
jump in here. Part of it is because I'm from Santa Cruz. That's why the water use is so low. They actually were on budgets for a lot of the majority of the past drought. I think it was capped at 6 or 8 billion units per household, like no exceptions. And so that really drove it down, is the pretty strict budgets that they were on in the last drought.
And Mr. Chair, I think similar to Santa Barbara, going through 2 major droughts, it becomes institutionalized. Essentially, we've incorporated it into our lifestyle.
As to the bridge, because this is operating on a Wi-Fi, does the bridge unit plug in to the interior of the house, or do you plug it on the outside of the house? And then what is the practical distance that you can go to the actual Flume device before it's not going to work?
Great question. So the bridge does plug in inside the house, and then there is also the part that straps around the meter. So there's 2 pieces. The distance between those two can be, at my house, it's 1,000 feet. It can be very far. And before Montecito went and swapped out all their meters with something that was incompatible with our Flume, we were like in lots of giant estates in Montecito, and there was no problem with kind of the distance between the house and the street, because those distances were pretty big in some cases.
Okay, and I hope I didn't miss this, but it looks like most of the data you're presenting to us is on a household basis. And what about on an occupant basis?
All of the indoor data was on an occupant basis.
It was?
The indoor analysis was on gallons per capita per day. The
Okay.
outdoor we showed you was on gallons per household.
Okay. All right, great. And then it's a battery-operated device, so you guys are servicing that yourself, and, you know, the homeowner?
The homeowner does. The homeowner can replace their own batteries. The Flume is very good about telling you when your batteries are low, and right through the app, the homeowner can order new batteries. It's a pretty simple process.
Okay. And then what's the phone number for people to call and to get one?
So the rebate is really handy because it's built in. So it's a discounted rebate essentially. So we encourage folks to go to our website that has all of our rebates listed. That's santabarbaraca.gov/rebates. And there's a direct link on there to get the Flume rebate. You just put in some of your water account information, you buy it at that discounted price.
Great. All right. Any other commission questions or comments? Okay, that was fantastic.
Thank
That
you.
was great. Thank you, gentlemen,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Mr. Hagmark, last but not least,
Yes.
and the most interesting report of today, I'm sorry to have to say that.
Yeah, so apologize, but we've been pulling this together, trying to give you a sense of the magnitude of the event that we experienced last Monday. We've got some great video and photos to show you of that, so we'll do our best to go through that. But we're going to start off, Ms. Corey, which I'd like to introduce as the new Water Supply and Services Manager. Yeah, we're still making my rounds to inform all the staff. I talked to her staff yesterday, so it's fresh off the press. But we wanted to give you just a little glimpse of where we were water supply-wise. Still a lot of data coming in, lots of changes happening. So we're going to walk through that. I'm going to talk about our response and some of the impacts to our water system that we had. And then, of course, answer all of your questions along the way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Corey to walk you through that.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmart. Good morning, Chair Young and Water Commissioners. As Mr. Hagmart said, I'm Dakota Corey, now the Water Supply and Services Manager. As you'll recall, these reports that we provide each month at Water Commission are looking at the previous month, and so all of the data in the report that you received is as of the end of December. And obviously, a lot's changed since then, so I'll try to put some context around what we're looking at here. Starting with this spreadsheet here, this is our plan and actual water production by source, so it shows how much water we used in December from each of our sources. And there's a couple of things I want to point out here. If we look at the Cachuma water, we also have a balance of our carryover water stored in Lake Cachuma. And you can see at the end of December that was about 17,400 acre feet. That water is still there, I'm happy to report. Cachuma is currently 94.5% full. And still rising about a foot a day. So they're still getting inflows from these last storms. We did have some emergency phone calls with the Bureau of Reclamation last week. They were interested in doing what they call a precautionary spill on Cachuma. And basically they were anticipating the last storm that we had coming in over the weekend, raising Cachuma even further, and they wanted to attenuate the downstream effects so they didn't have a huge slug going over all at once. So they were going to start doing some preemptive releases to make room in the reservoir. The modeling for that storm didn't really suggest it was going to be inundating with the inflows, and so as the water managers, we pressed the Bureau to reconsider those precautionary releases. And at the 11th hour, they heard us and they rolled back their plan to do those precautionary releases. They're still monitoring levels, and maybe in 4 to 7 days, they'll start those precautionary releases. Why that's a concern for us is that water is potentially, the first water to spill in Cachuma is carryover water. And they consider that a spill even though it's at their hand versus, a natural spill over the reservoir. So we do have a meeting with the county and the other member units this afternoon to talk a little bit further about our strategy with interacting with the Bureau moving forward around some of these policies with these precautionary spills. And then I guess this is a good place to also point out Gibraltar Reservoir. So Gibraltar started spilling January 5th, so ahead of that large storm at 11 a.m. But then with the large storm that was from the 9th to the 11th, we got 15.96 inches of rain in 3 days. And 13.16 inches of rain fell in a 24-hour period the night of the 9th. So talking to Frank, our dam operator, he was like, "You can't believe it, Dakota. I've never seen the gates open that high." Like, it was a big event. So pretty exciting, and Mr. Hagmark will give some updates on what that meant up at Gibraltar, but it is continuing to spill. And from a water supply perspective, this is such good news because a full Gibraltar represents, about 40% of our total annual water demand. So in terms of drought planning and looking to the future, just Gibraltar full alone buys us easily another year, and we really don't see ourselves in any sort of drought condition in the next 3 years.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Are we going to come back to talk about Cachuma a little bit, or can I ask a question right now?
Now's a good time, I think. Sure.
Okay. My question, and you started to get there, sorry. You started to get there with the carryover balance. What happens if, in fact, they don't do the precautionary spill and the carryover issue and then allocation of the new filled water? is our carryover water protected in some way that we do have that carryover and then distribution from here on out on the net remaining?
So that's a really good question. So from my perspective as a water supply manager and Mr. Hagmark's perspective, we're in like the super sweet spot right now, right? Because Kachuma is almost all the way full, but not quite spilling, which means that we should be able to renegotiate for a full allocation of our Kachuma water for this water year, and that's part of what we're going to be meeting with the county about this afternoon. But our carryover water is protected, so we would have that volume of carryover water plus our current year allocation.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, another question, but if it does spill, it eventually spills, that first water that spills is the carryover water, so, and it's likely to spill the way things are going, no? Unless we have really dry conditions.
Yeah, so if the weather dries up, we could stay in that sweet spot. It's only January, so a spill is still probably probable this year. We do lose our carryover water, and that feels really like heart-wrenching since we've been in, I mean, that's been our saving volume of water for years now, right, in these dry conditions. But a full Kachuma also means that we have several years worth of water supply available to us and sort of guaranteed 100% allocations for many years. So really, we're still in a very good spot.
So it probably doesn't make any difference, but trying to draw more Kachuma water right now, changing our use, our source probably is.
So we've made some adjustments to that end. We turned off our groundwater wells. They weren't providing a big proportion of the water that we were using. What's tricky is when it rains in California is also when our demands are very low. So at this stage, we are relying on desalinated water and Kachuma water. We're not pulling from Gibraltar yet because that water is still very turbid and hard to treat. So yes, we will be using our Kachuma water, but we just don't have really high demands in January, February.
And what about throttling down the desal plant a bit?
That's a little more complicated. We are meeting with them to talk about that. But yeah, and the other one that we will be discussing is maybe turning off recycled water, which is a little easier to do. And again, when you're spilling water to the ocean, does it make sense to spend 3 or 4 times the cost to produce and circulate recycled water? What we can do is take bottled water, put it in the recycled water system, distribute it, and it's significantly less to do so than providing recycled water. So as soon as we're not spilling to the ocean, then yes, we should start resume recycled water operations. And that's, again, rather than desal, that's an easier operation to shut down. And again, we're talking a month or two of that situation occurring here.
Okay, Cora.
I was just wondering for reference when the last time the Kachuma was full.
So we had pretty good rainfall, and this is from memory, in 2017, and I think we got to about 80%. But that was in a huge string of dry periods, so we drew it down again pretty quickly as a cohort of member units on that project. The last time it was full and spilled was 2011, which I did not work for the city, and Mr. Hagmark didn't work in this position, so this is all very exciting for staff.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting. I was reflecting on my youngest being 1 when he last spilled, and just it's quite mind-boggling. One of the things that is interesting when we talk about Kachuma was designed, and the way that the water rights were prescribed is it was to retain water that would have gone into the ocean. That is what ends up being called project water, is water that would have ended up in the ocean. Therefore, not to impact the rights of the downstream users, because the downstream users do not participate in the cost of Kachuma. They don't pay for the maintenance, they didn't pay for the construction. That was all borne by the Kachuma members, the city being one of those. And so one of the things that, we were challenged in our conversations with the Bureau is wanting to do these preemptive releases. At the time, the reservoir was 10 feet from spilling, so it still had a pretty significant capacity. But they were wanting to be responsive to the downstream users who said, we want you to do these releases to make room for kind of a storm flood control. And I'm like, well, that sounds great, but then they should be coming to the table and paying for the environmental impacts associated with Kachuma, the financial cost of operating that project if they want to have that flood control benefit. And so it kicks off a healthy conversation. And, not that I'm against operating that. Some reservoirs were built exactly for flood control. But this reservoir wasn't built out for that. And the capacity of the river was such, and we want to see sediment travel down and, replenish the beaches to have that kind of larger spill conditions. And so, anyway, it's a good conversation, not right or wrong. It's just more of what's fair and reasonable when it comes to this, because that water, again, the other downstream benefit that they currently have that is also up for debate is they have the ability to now store water in the reservoir and release it surgically when they want it. When the project was originally designed, it was the intent that water was released as it accrued. So as runoff comes into the lake, into the spring, that water should be released downstream, and the downstream river act as it normally would have acted. But we don't do that now. They have a water rights order in which they don't, as you may recall, they don't pay, again, for doing this. And they also, their water in the lake does not evaporate, which puts more pressure on what other water remains in there does evaporate. But they have the ability now to do these surgical releases in August, which is to their benefit, and yet they don't participate in the cost of the project. So there's some of these issues that, I think over time still continue to be kind of fester and need to be addressed, but they're very controversial and incredibly political. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Are there opportunities in the conversation with the various users for groundwater recharge in the Santa Ynez area with this water, so that instead of all just going to the ocean, to try to make as much use of it in groundwater recharge?
There was some conversation. Maybe Ms. Corey can recall. I mean, we had CCWA look into when we were looking at ground banking opportunities for not only state water, but I don't recall that it really bore any.
No, I think locally for storage, it didn't really pan out. And I can't remember specifically the reason that the Santa Ynez Valley didn't pan out as a storage solution. We know here south, on the coastal part of the mountains, we just don't have very big basins. We did also look at opportunities for, so we have capacity in the State Water Project system. And lower Table A amounts or allocation for state water, but SLO has the opposite. They have a lot of Table A water, but they don't have as much capacity. And so we looked at some opportunities for sharing capacity versus water, and those are still moving forward. But banking specifically locally didn't really pan out, and instead we're looking at banking up in the Central Valley as a potential option. And we're still pursuing that.
There may be windows coming up. Again, the Santa Ynez Valley is forming a GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency, which will open the door for that kind of more regional discussions about how do they replenish their basin. So there could be opportunities there, but we'll see. I know we're going to be talking. We've got questions already. I mean, it just kicks off, as you can imagine. This is about a week old. Kicks off. We have quite a few ASR wells, and so we're interested in trying to take, especially in a spill condition, as much water as we can and see if we can put it back in the ground. But it is, difficult.
Yeah, we stopped that pilot, right? Sorry.
Exactly.
We stopped that pilot, but now's the time to actually restart it.
We would love to
have the water,
restart
right?
it.
We're looking into that as well.
Yeah.
So if we've got just a second, I also wanted to pivot to a little bit bigger picture and what's happening at the state level and the State Water Project. As we know, these storms hit the entire state, and the water situation is improving statewide. If you look at some of the major water reservoirs in the State Water Project, they're hovering around 40 to 50% full, so Oroville is actually at 59%. If you look at the historical average and where it should be for January, it's very much above average. It's 106% of where it would typically be this time of year, so that's really promising. And San Luis similarly is 48% full. It has a little bit different of an average curve, so it's about 68% of the historical average. So those are huge improvements. We were down in the 20s and 30s prior to these storms. The other thing to mention is snowpack is very good right now. It's at 200% of normal in some locations. If we can stay cold and slowly melt that snowpack, especially in reservoirs like Oroville, they actually peak out their capacity with the snowmelt in June. So that's all really promising at the statewide level. We haven't yet heard anything from, the governor's office or the State Water Resources Control Board about rolling back the drought emergency. I expect that will probably be coming. And we also haven't seen an increase in our state water project allocation yet, but we've heard that we probably will hear something in the next week or so. So it's currently still at 5%, which means we have 165 acre feet of water for 2023. We also had banked some of our state water in San Luis Reservoir. So in total, we have about 1,400 acre feet. We actually just authorized CCWA to send 1,200 of that acre feet back to AVEC, Antelope Valley, which is our water debt. We have 2,000 acre feet that we want to pay back by 2026. So we're going to send a bunch of that back. I don't know that anybody's concerned right now that San Luis will spill, but it's a possibility. And so it's nice to get that water somewhere where it's useful now. And then as we see allocations on the project change, we could potentially send some more water to AVAC. We also want to continue to participate in our exchange agreement with ID1, which basically converts our state water allocation to Kachuma water.
And I would caution,
One more comment. So we know diesel is not a possibility right now in terms of short-term decisions, but we do have, I think it's in April, when we make the decision with the contractor, how to operate for the next water year. So I think the commission would probably want to talk about what's happening once we get a little closer to the end of, our rainy season, which this year has been so great, and talk about that. No?
Well, one of the other items is I would caution, I don't anticipate, even if continues to be wet, that we will get 100% state water allocation.
When was the last time that happened?
I don't even think it's in their spreadsheet that that's possible, but
40% would be lucky.
So in terms of the report, it's the standard graphs that you've seen. I think our conversation was probably more illustrative than what you see in the report. It's going to look very different next month, so I'm excited to show you the graphs next month. Interesting that NOAA is still showing that we have the potential for above average temperature and below average precipitation for January through March. So we know last year that we got some rain in December and then everything dried up, potentially. We could be looking at that now. There isn't any storms on the 10-day, 2-week horizon currently, but it's only January. So really, there's a lot up in the air in terms of what we're going to see for the rest of the rainy season.
I always like this graphic to kind of point out just, the variability of where we live. I mean, it's really, as much as NOAA is using the best available science, it really, for us, takes 2 or 3 storms to really make the difference between a winner and a loser for rainfall this year. And they just can't, the models can't predict that kind of subtlety. So the point here is it could dry out. And I think that the long-term outlook, I mean, we're still seeing downward trends in rainfall year over year. So with that, I've got some highlights, not only the damage and recovery, because you heard more of the positive side, and there's always the challenging side. So I'm going to dig a little bit into that. Let's hopefully technology works here. This is some video from El Estero. Again, the staff quickly put this together. It's amazing, but just kind of gives you a sense of the urgency going on at El Estero when we get this. We still get an enormous amount of stormwater into our sewer system, despite years of messaging and years of work trying to find those illegal connections. We had peaked out at 34 MGD. Keep in mind we treat about 6 million gallons a day, so just substantial stormwater in our system. So let's see, let's get this going. Yeah, that was as high as it would go. And there's some sound to this. that might be added. It's a. So anyway, I can just go over this. This is what we do to protect the lower gallery. That's a quick little dam setup that we put in there. Anyway, it kind of gives you a sense around 7:30 on Monday morning. Just we had all of our influent pumps going, everything we could push through the system. And staff kind of has their kind of emergency plan. You can see just water was actually coming up through the floors. That's in the lower intake. The bar screens, that's what removes trash. We actually had to bypass that because it was just rocks, as you can see in here. Rocks and other debris getting into the system. And this is normally what our primaries look like. They were completely submerged. The clarifiers were submerged. The launderers were submerged. Just giving you a sense. Again, this isn't high strength material coming in. A lot of stormwater, a lot of silt coming in. You can just see kind of the flooded condition, what it looks like before, and then what it looks like after. Just certainly running everything at capacity.
How's the effluent quality?
They are, maybe Amanda can speak to this. I don't believe we had any violations related to our release. This is El Estero. I mean, we had giant ponding. The Vercal building next door had some flood damage. It's an El Estero. We did have a water leak that damaged one of our circulation pumps for our digesters. Fortunately, staff were able to get a quick repair in there. They're really getting good at buying stuff on eBay. So, know that once they had that part. Come on up.
Chair Young, Commissioners, we utilized other non-working MCCs and kind of made a Frankenstein for this MCC that was damaged. And so they got it repaired within a day, got everything mixing with our digesters and solids. And to go back to your question, to our knowledge, we're still researching. We did not violate our treatment. When it's that much stormwater, it's just stormwater. There's not much of a treatment. But I am really proud to say the very next day, we were able to recover our complete treatment and begin treating just as normally. So our operators did a tremendous job. In a 24-hour period, all hands were on deck. Stayed in town, and so made sure that we were able to recover rather quickly and didn't damage any of our treatment system.
Yeah, I mean, it gets us. We're able to get some of our operators put up in hotels because we wanted to make sure they could show up to work the next day, and we knew we were going to need more people on hand. We did have 3 spills in the collection system. Again, all storm-related spills, and some of them have some long-term capital repairs that could be done. But we really, I don't know if you saw any of our messaging. Both Amanda and I were speaking with the media and just really trying to get out that our homeowners need to know that putting, their rain gutter water or lawn drain water is just really detrimental. We even had in some neighborhoods people popping manholes to drain their street or drain their, which just continues to exacerbate the problems. And again, an educational issue. And maybe in some cases we need to lock down those manholes so that people can't do that. But yeah, again, it's been a long time since we've had rain events like this.
Mr. Chair,
So
I was going to compliment staff. Your messaging did get out, and I thought it was really well done. So my kudos to both of you.
So we don't have a combined system, so I'm just curious, illegal connections account for that much?
It doesn't take much. I think people, when you, say, for example, were to drain your roof, you're talking a couple thousand gallons can come off your roof easily in a short downpour. And that just dwarfs whatever comes from a normal household. So if you get, a couple hundred homes who have for whatever reason, didn't like the ponding in their backyard or don't like how you make that connection to your sewer lateral, illegal connection to the sewer lateral, whether you hired a contractor and that was just the easy thing to do. It doesn't take a lot of those before it quickly overwhelms.
And are we certain that infiltration into the
Certainly a
sewage
component.
collection lines is not contributing
And
to that?
we will know more soon. As you may recall, we did or are doing an I&I study right now, which perfect. And so we've collected some really great information, and Amanda and her team are going to be digesting that information, which is going to let us know where the majority of the stormwater came from. We have some suspicious neighborhoods that typically generate more than others, and so that will help us kind of drill in and help us continue to flush out those illegal connections.
I was going to make a pun about digesting
Nah.
information. I thought, nah.
I just want to
Let's not.
kind of reiterate what our staff, both on collections and on operations, went through that night. So as Josh mentioned, we have a capacity. Our flow meter goes up to 34 MGD. We experienced more than that. We don't know how much. Our influent flow, which you saw on there, that was restricted down to 22% opening. So that meant we were backing up our collection system because that's all we could do. And it's because of the operations we were able to get back our treatment system so quickly. So, however, backing up our collection system ends up causing problems, and 2 of our spills were because of that. And as Josh and Mr. Hagmark reiterated, we do have 47 smart covers in our collection system right now because of our I&I study. And the operators, our collection team operators, usually with a storm, you see a gradual rise in the flow. This was not a gradual rise. It was all of a sudden a peak. And I reiterate, and I use this analogy only because I was born and raised in Las Vegas, but it started sounding like a casino. Ding, 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 ding. Everything was going out. We don't have that much staff. We have over, I think, 5,000 manholes. We don't have that much staff to go to every single manhole. And so we were constantly trying to figure out where the issues are. And because of the peak, and we will be analyzing the data. Thank goodness we had the smart covers. But because of the peak came not gradual, but rapid, I do believe there was some popping of the manholes, and there was a lot of folks, maybe education on our staffing, and then also to the public. The sewer system is not designed to carry that storm flow. So it's not, and so we need to kind of address this for the next time, because the next time these storms are going to happen, it's just going to be more intense. It's going to be less frequent, but more intense, and so we need to become prepared for it. And luckily, we had that I&I in there, and we can hopefully hone in onto what the issues are.
And I think that kind of, again, it's anecdotal. We need to dig into the data, but how quickly it rose led us to believe more of it is inflow rather than infiltration, which usually has a lag. It has to infiltrate into the ground to get into cracks or whatever it is. Certainly there's a component, and we should be able to kind of tease that data out of the I&I study once we get into that.
Yeah, because the following storm, Saturday, we didn't see any of it. And it was just a normal flow of storm event that we see, the gradual maybe I&I. So that's why we kind of think that there is something more to it than just infiltration.
And just as a reminder, and make sure I got this right, in 2009 was the last time we did an I&I study, and our system was rated for about a 10-year event, 10-year event. I think we've definitely made some progress. I think when the I&I study comes back, we're going to be able to hone in on what it is. But this event, at least last time I heard, is somewhere around a 25-year rain event. So we're not to a 25-year rain event, and it's certainly intensity duration all play a factor in that. But we'll be looking into that some more, and I'm sure at some point we'll come back with more information for you all on that. Okay. And then we did experience a pretty good mudslide up at Tunnel Reservoir in Mission Canyon. We were able to get crew deployed and get this cleaned up and really trying to make sure we can keep it secure for the rest of this winter. We did lose a part of the road feeding Schofield Reservoir. We've got some temporary sandbags in now to try and keep the water on the road, but that's going to be a long-term repair that we'll have to come back for. The bigger story here was Gibraltar. We started making our way to Gibraltar. It took us a little more than 2.5 days to get to Gibraltar. We had got permission from Caltrans to take 154 up to East Camino Cielo. It took us about most of the day to go across East Camino Cielo at the very top of the hill to get to Gibraltar Road, and then it took us at least a day and a half to get down Gibraltar Road. Just numerous mudslides across that road to get down to the reservoir. I think the commission's had an opportunity to tour, and we've driven down that road in the van. And so we do now have vehicular access. We are asking the public, please stay away for now. It's really muddy back there. The Forest Service has closed the forests for concerns, but of course there's a lot of looky-loos who want to come out, and I don't blame them. But right now we've got a lot of crews back there working and kind of getting it. For those who may recall the Devil's Creek diversion, there's a creek that used to be here. We've been spending this week trying to reestablish the creek so that we can divert water from Devil's Canyon, which typically tends to be our better source of water following immediately after a rainfall. So we're trying to dig that out. That's going on right now. I hope to have that finished by the end of the week. And then I have for you, let's see if this works. This was a video taken on Tuesday, the 10th, from a county sheriff's helicopter. And I had our city TV shrink it down to make it something we could view here. But let's see. I didn't do what I wanted to do. So there's no sound with this. But that is Paradise Road coming into the bottom of Red Rock Canyon. That road is going to take months to dig out. There was numerous mudslides. And eventually we'll get up here to Gibraltar and kind of get a sense. Oh my God. Now again, the gates here are open about 2.5 feet. Overnight they were up to 8 feet wide, 8 feet open. You'll notice 3 gates are going. And then we have an emergency gate over here, which we did not operate. And right here we have a skimmer gate. This was our big problem right here. We got so much debris that came in that it basically destroyed our log booms, and we lost a good portion of our log booms through the gates. So we have crews up there this week and a contractor helping us to cut the log boom cables out of the gates so that we can close them. So we've been working on that. And we're going to have to, I think, completely replace the log booms. They really were inundated by this event. Let's see. And as you can see, it looks like we're in the chocolate milk business, but this is really our drinking water supply. And it will clear out. It just takes some time, and we're continuing to get flows into the reservoir. Those are getting clearer as we go, but it likely is going to be at least a month before this probably water supply is available to us.
I wonder how Frank slept.
He didn't sleep.
The roar of this.
We had him. He was waking up every 2 hours to do checks, and typically we have someone up there with him when we have these events scheduled, and this caught us off guard. When we tried to get someone up there, we already had lost access. So we actually flew someone in the next day. So we had someone in there to relieve him, and they could take turns. But yeah, it took out his water system, so he did not have any water either. So yeah, it's quite quite damaging. Yeah.
Cora?
I was just wondering about all the debris that you see there, it like coming up against the gates. Do you remove any of that? Or like, so I saw some bigger like logs and stuff like that. Does that get removed?
Yeah, so once we got someone to help Frank, because I really, when he's up there by himself, I really want what he's doing to be very risk averse. So once we had some staff up there to help him, they got out on a boat and actually got that debris and channeled it over the skimmer gate. So they got all that stuff, took them a few days, but they got it all over and into the plunge pool down below. So they've gotten that out of the way so they can now start to do some of these repairs and get the remaining log boom out of the way.
Can you send us the link to that video?
Yes, we're working on making that available, cleaning it up and making sure we've got all the permissions in order for that. But yeah, and we will have more pictures coming out as the cleanup comes. But we did file, I don't know the final number, several million. What are we up to? $7.5 million in damages, and again, some of them this is what we think maybe. So, because it was declared a federal emergency, and so we've already started our work with the FEMA representatives on this. And so we'll be working probably for the next year or more with some of these repairs. Will take some time. So, I shout out to our distribution crew. They've spent a considerable amount of time up there doing cleanup operations, including in town. Really appreciate all the hard work they've put into this to make it happen, in addition to their normal day job. So, other than that, I really could just go through our normal managers. I don't have any, there was no highlights to me out of that. I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Go ahead, Cora.
I just wanted to second the kudos to city crews. I definitely saw in the days after the storm, like wherever I went, there were so many crews out there working on downed trees or water systems or whatever it was. It was just an amazing show of force for the city. So, yeah.
Good.
Any other questions? You know, I went to Mission Creek at Oak Park, right in the middle of everything, because I'm one of those looky-loos.
Yeah.
I'm impressed at the force, hitting the I guess the giant culverts that go into the roads. Is that Alomar Road or something?
Mm-hmm.
Does staff go out to assess damage?
Yes.
After each of these events? And the water is coming up over the top. And
Exactly. De La Vina Bridge, which we have made considerably wider, even got inundated there too. But yes, as soon as floodwaters recede, we have both an operation folks and engineers going to make sure that there was no undermining of the structure. Everything so far looks really good. We came out of this, a lot of work, a lot of cleanup, but fundamentally we did pretty well. I'm pretty impressed. And again, that I think has been the investment in infrastructure and maintenance that we've done.
okay, if that's it, then I think we can adjourn until our next meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.